becoming the first queen of one of the most famous nations on the planet at the tender age of 15, only to have that title ripped away from you just 9 days later. That's what happened to a young woman named Lady Jane Grey in July 1553. But what was her life like before her reign? How did she take the throne in the first place? And what happened to her after her reign? This is the fascinating life story of Lady Jane Grey. So, for starters, what was her life like before her reign? Lady Jane Grey was born in October 1537 to Henry Grey and his wife Frances. She was the great-granddaughter of King Henry VII of England. That was a picture by W. Hull, undated as to when the picture was made. Anywho, she, according to Britannica.com, was considered a smart and beautiful young lady. She had the privileges of being noble, and she was considered, well, as I said, very intelligent, learned multiple languages, as pointed out by, well, both Britannica and Biography.com point these things out. So learned multiple languages. She also spent some time living with Thomas Seymour and his wife Catherine Parr, and they were both devout Protestant, and, well, I'm sure that must have influenced Lady Jane as well, because she was raised to be devout Protestant. So much so that England's Forgotten Queen, The Life and Death of Lady Jane Grey, the documentary, even points out that women in their 40s would write to Lady Jane asking for religious advice because she was seen as such a zealot, if you will, for her faith. Eventually, her father became the Duke of Suffolk, and she married Lord Guilford Dudley, son of the Duke of Northumberland. These are things to keep in mind as we move into our next section. So, what happened to Lady Jane Grey to make her become queen in the first place? How did she take the throne? Well, as pointed out by EnglishHistory.net, I have revised their family tree for her, if you will. She was the great-granddaughter of King Henry VII. Now, the throne went to King Henry VII's son, King Henry VIII, and because the idea of women taking the throne was preposterous back then, Edward VI became king. However, he died at 16, when he was still, well, he didn't have any heirs to his throne. In comes John Dudley, his regent, and also the father of Jane Grey's husband, Lord Guilford Dudley. So John Dudley was also devout Protestant, and, well, the next logical heir to the throne was Mary I, but she was devout Catholic, so he encouraged Edward instead to declare Lady Jane as the next heir to the throne for her devout Protestantism, and also it was super beneficial for him. His son was married to her. So, Edward accepted, and when he died, Lady Jane was called in to become the next Queen of England. Well, first queen, next heir. When, according to Britannica.com, when she was even asked to become queen in the first place, she actually fainted. And so clearly she kind of didn't want to be queen, it sounds like. But obviously she accepted and was then taken to the Tower of London to begin her reign. However, as the documentary England's Forgotten Queen points out, within the 9 days of her reign, basically the peasants revolted, and Mary gained power until she became the queen. Because as the people saw it, as the law saw it, as everybody saw it, Mary was the rightful heir of the throne, regardless of whether or not she was Catholic. So, Mary eventually took the throne. This then begs the question, what happened to Lady Jane Grey after her reign? Well, after her reign, as this picture points out, you guessed it, she was executed. So, eventually, when Mary took the throne, just 9 days later, she realized, according to England's Forgotten Queen documentary, that, well, Jane would be a constant beacon for rebellion for the Protestant cause, especially since she was Catholic. Mary was Catholic. And so this would be problematic. Not only that, but Jane had technically committed treason because she had declared herself queen when she wasn't, technically. So Jane pled guilty at trial, according to my sources, Britannica biography. And she pled guilty, and according to the documentary, Mary didn't really want to execute Lady Jane, but again, as aforementioned, she kind of felt she didn't have much of a choice because Jane would be a beacon for rebellion. So in February of 1554, Jane was beheaded along with her husband. So very, very tragic. But there are definitely things that we can learn from Jane's story. We can learn that, number one, just don't get messed up in politics. Number two, we see that Jane was kind of a pawn, if you will, for political power figures of the time, John Dudley and her father, the Duke of Suffolk. And also, she just seems to have a tragic life story. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for listening.